If medieval buildings were built by guesswork, they would have collapsed before World War II ever reshaped Europe. Roofs would have sagged into dust. Floors would have twisted themselves into traps. Load-bearing beams would have snapped long before steel skyscrapers stole the spotlight. Yet here we are, still standing beneath timber frames that were cut when iron was precious, math was slow, and wood was green, wet, and absolutely hostile to human plans. That survival wasn't luck. It wasn't divine protection. It was engineering. Cold, ruthless, patient engineering. And at the centre of it all was a forgotten tool most people have never heard of: the medieval wood press. This wasn't some romantic artisan ritual, no chants, no mysticism, just a brutal understanding of how wood behaves when it thinks nobody is watching. Medieval builders didn't fight time. They used it as a weapon. This is the story of how they did it, why it worked, and why modern builders quietly relearn the same lesson every time a rushed structure fails. Why medieval builders respected time while modern construction races it. Modern construction worshipped speed. Medieval carpentry respected process. Depending on thickness, boards stayed under compression for weeks or months. Pressure was adjusted gradually as the wood shrank. Early on, adjustments were frequent. Later, spaced out as stabilization occurred. The goal wasn't instant perfection. It was denying the wood opportunities to misbehave during its most dangerous phase. That patience shows. Timber frame buildings from the 13th century often display straighter lines and fewer stress fractures than many modern structures built with rushed, mechanically dried lumber. Wood remembers how it was treated when it was weak. Medieval builders understood that instinctively. Why this knowledge stayed hidden. Wood pressing wasn't common knowledge, it was guild knowledge. Apprentices learned it by doing, not reading. It was intentionally undertaught and closely guarded. A guild known for stable buildings stayed in demand. Reputation mattered. Standards mattered. Secrecy protected both. Archaeological finds across northern Europe have uncovered remnants of wooden screw presses in workshop sites. These weren't experiments, they were infrastructure. Adapted from wine and oil presses already common in agricultural life, refined for timber through experience. This wasn't innovation out of nowhere. It was intelligent borrowing perfected over time. Why movement destroys buildings faster than decay. A twisting beam destroys joinery. A cupping plank lifts floors. A split propagates weakness across entire frames. Medieval builders obsessed over stability because repair was expensive and failure unforgiving. Pressing solved the movement problem at its root. A plank denied the ability to warp during drying was far less likely to do so later. Internal stresses had already been resolved. That's why surviving medieval halls and barns show uniform spacing and long-term structural calm. The wood had already done its fighting before installation. This isn't a lost art. It's a neglected one. How modern builders and survivalists can apply this today. Anyone milling their own lumber with a chainsaw mill or Alaskan mill can replicate the medieval wood press with modern materials. 2 strong beams, 4 vertical posts, threaded steel rods and nuts to replace wooden screws. The principle remains identical: Fresh boards are stacked with spaces for airflow. Pressure is applied gradually. In the first week, adjustments are made daily as the wood shrinks. After that, every few days until stabilization. The pressure stays firm, never crushing. The result is lumber that resists warping far better than unattended air-dried boards. For survivalists building cabins, sheds, long-term shelters, or infrastructure in harsh climates with wide humidity swings, this method dramatically extends the usable life of timber. Pressing can even rehabilitate warped boards. Controlled moisture, gentle heat, and steady pressure over time can often correct deformation. Medieval shield makers use similar principles to shape curved boards without sacrificing strength. Once you understand how moisture and pressure interact, wood stops being unpredictable. It only misbehaves when you let it. The deeper lesson behind the medieval wood press. When people admire medieval buildings, they praise scale and ornament. What they miss is restraint. These builders didn't romanticize materials. They studied them. They engineered improvements through observation, patience, and process. That mindset is why structures built before industrialization still stand, while some modern buildings fail within decades. The medieval wood press wasn't symbolic, it wasn't ceremonial, it was necessary. And once you understand it, you never look at an old beam the same way again. If you want more overlooked techniques, forgotten tools, and hard-earned knowledge from the old world, subscribe to Old World Prep. Share this with someone who still thinks medieval builders were guessing their way through history. These skills survived because they worked, and they still do.